Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Professor Dr. Rose Alinda Alias.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Are you a holistic thinker? If you ask that question, what would be your answer? So let's try a test. What and where was this photo taken? Here. Who and what is in this photo? Is us. So everyone said, is us. You're not a holistic thinker. You didn't notice all the other elements in the photo. You didn't notice the lights. You didn't notice the monitor. You didn't notice the big screen. You only noticed Isas. And why is that? Would Isas have been able to play their wonderful song this morning if there wasn't any microphone? If there wasn't any lights on him, if there wasn't any ambience creating the mood for us to enjoy the music, would you have enjoyed it? No. The whole thing, all the elements on this stage contributed to the feeling that you had as you watched Isas play the saxophone on stage. So what's the story? The story is the whole system. It's not just one individual. It's not just Isas and his saxophone. It's the whole elements that are on the stage that made it happen. So what's a holistic thinker? Are you able to read this? What is it? What is a holistic thinker? You are able to see the whole picture despite the words being spread up all over the screen. The world is made up of many systems. Being a holistic thinker is about understanding the whole system within the constellation of systems. It's not about breaking it into parts. It's about understanding the whole story and the whole system. A holistic thinker is able to relate the parts and see the interdependencies of the parts. If we did not have the microphone working this morning, we would not have been able to hear Isas playing the saxophone. If the hall was dark, we'll only hear Isas. We won't be able to see him with all his movements. So the interdependencies of the various components makes the whole system. It's all about the meaning that we put into it. So as a specific thinker or an analytic thinker, we only see things in the foreground. All the other things we put behind. Whatever is in the background is not important. It's only what is in front or what is in the foreground. And whenever we try to understand something, we break it down with the principles of reductionism. How do we understand the whole story? That is the thinking that we need to nurture in our student. The holistic thinker sees the whole. The holistic thinker sees the interdependencies of elements or the parts. The holistic thinker sees the relationship of the foreground and the background. And the holistic thinker does sense making. Why is sense making important? How do we educate our students? How were we educated ourselves? We have been taught from very young to think systematically. We have been taught to think scientifically, meaning There are cause and effect. You assume the world is objective. You say that the world is made up of all of these parts. If something happens, result will be like this. When we educate a student, the majority of our education is actually training the left brain of students. When we train a student to be an engineer, a computer scientist, what are we training? We're training them to think systematically. If you're an engineer, you're training them to build something, build a bridge, build a machine, build a building. We compartmentalize our brains into left and right. But do we integrate both? Do we have in our curriculum studying, engineering, and music? Do we have curriculum or programs offering psychology and computer science? That is where we are moving towards. We're moving towards multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, where we try to build both the left and the right brain. However, our education system is dominated by this compartmentalization approach. But that will change soon enough. And that is what we're aspiring to do. Mushtaq published a book on Think Like an Engineer. What does think like an engineer mean? Can you think like an engineer? Build like an engineer, but feel like a person. A thinking, feeling engineer. Sense making. An engineer who is conscious about what he is building, what he is creating, what the impact would be on the organization, on the society, on the community that he is developing that artifact. Computer science also have the same issue. We code programs, we develop artifacts, we develop software. And when we do that, we assume the software, when it is implemented in organizations, everything will be fine. We assume the software and system will solve the P word, solve the problem. But do we ever think what's the unintended consequences of deploying that system? Do we ever think what happens when that system is implemented and then used over time? What the effect of that device, what the effect of the technology would be when we implement, when we deploy that technology. We talk about the use of technology in classrooms. We talk about the use of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, robotics, gamification, all these technologies in our classroom. Do we ever think what's the impact on learning is? As educators, do we think, oh, I've used AI in my class. Oh, an achievement for me. I've used MOOC. I've introduced a technology. But do you think about what kind of person are you nurturing? Not creating, nurturing. When we lose all the touch that we have, the context, the interactions between the educator and the student in the classroom, when we take away the context from learning and replace it with technology, are we actually creating a holistic thinker? A holistic thinker is someone who is conscious all the time, continuously reflecting the impacts and the outcomes of his creation, and feeling responsible not just for the one-time deployment of the artifact, but feeling as long as the system has been deployed, feeling continuously responsible for that device or for that system, especially mitigating and addressing the unintended consequences. So, in information systems, for your information, my field is information systems. Although I was trained as a computer scientist, my bachelor was a computer science degree in Miami. And then I decided to go and do MBA along with Masters in Computer Information Systems. So I was beginning to move from my very technical background into a more softer discipline. And my PhD was in information systems. And one of the most important things that I learned during my PhD when I did it in Salford, United Kingdom, was the whole concept about systems thinking. Because throughout, before that, I've always been taught about systems engineering, software engineering, the quantitative method, positivist epistemology. The exposure of doing PhD in Salford showed me that it is beyond that. We are responsible for everything that we create. So, thinking like an engineer, thinking like a sociologist, how do we put it together? Thinking like an engineer who thinks like a sociologist. Thinking like a computer scientist who thinks like a psychologist. So putting this together is something that we hope we can produce in our classroom. And we have ways to do this. We have learning innovations. We have thinking tools. So I've just showed Zaid. I always like to use his drawings, his figure sticks in my slides because I think that's just so amusing. So why draw? So drawing as a thinking tool helps us to understand the bigger picture. Because one of the things that I was trained in systems thinking, specifically in soft systems methodology by Chaklin, was using rich picture to show a problematic situation in the real world conceptualized into what we call catwalks, or what we call trying to model the reality of the real world. So, for the past 1 year, we've been trying to develop this future-ready curriculum concept. The important thing about future-ready curriculum shows that there must always be alignment between the curriculum, how you deliver the curriculum, and how you assess the students. They are interrelated. And it is sad that when we did the study, we found that the majority of our programs in public universities, compared to the private universities, we are more oriented towards the traditional mode of curriculum. I have to specifically mention that our group was very much impressed by what was done at Taylor's, and I think Mushtaq was partly responsible, or the wholly or partly responsible for that. That was the kind of curriculum framework that we were working on. So how do you nurture these students? So how to nurture a student to be a holistic thinker? I would suggest that you try to understand the future-ready curriculum in terms of how you deliver your teaching and learning and how you do your assessment. Perhaps that can be the topic of another talk that I can give for another session because time is running out. So I'll just remind on last few slides that I have, we have the system in place. The ministry has already drawn up the blueprint for us to follow. There are different levels from the biggest system, which is by the ministry through the blueprint, right down to us at the individual level as educators. Each of these levels are responsible for producing future ready graduates, so what we call future proof talents. So implement this, try to look at your curriculum and look at how these sub-elements can actually revise your curriculum that you offer, especially if you're offering new programs. So on that note, thank you very much. And I'll just breeze through the whole thing and end with this so that you will always remember the future ready curriculum and take an effort to learn more about how we can improve and transform our curriculum to be future ready. Thank you very much.